The transport ship looked tiny next to the massive station. Kepler-7 was one of the biggest space stations in the Outer Rim, built from black metal and crystal that sparkled like stars. Ships from 100 different worlds docked there every day. Most arrived with fanfare, war drums, light shows, or messages broadcast across the galaxy. The human ship just quietly slid into Dock Bay 7. Ambassador Lee Tae-ho stepped out first. He wore a simple dark suit and carried a briefcase that looked like it came from any office building. His black hair was neat, his face calm. He looked around the dock with mild interest, like someone waiting for a bus. Dr. Park So-young followed, behind him. She was shorter than Lee, with kind eyes and a small smile. She carried her own briefcase and nodded politely to the alien dock workers who stared at them. Some of the workers had never seen humans before. Captain Kim Woo-bin came last. He was taller than the other two, with broad shoulders and steady hands. But he moved slowly, carefully, like he had all the time in the world. His uniform was clean, but not fancy. The three humans walked toward the main entrance of the station. Around them, other species hurried past. Giant crystalline beings that looked like walking diamonds clicked across the metal floors. Lizard-like creatures with scales that changed color hissed at each other in their own language. Insect beings, with 6 arms, scurried between the crowds. None of them paid much attention to the humans at first. Humans looked so ordinary. No claws, no armor, no weapons that anyone could see. They were just 3 people with briefcases, but something felt different. High Chancellor Vexthal waited in the greeting chamber. He was a Vorthan, one of the crystal beings. His body was 12 feet tall and made of blue-green crystal that caught the light. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with thunder. Behind him stood representatives from the major powers in the Empire. War Prince Zixanthor of the Dragon People breathed smoke from his nostrils. His red scales glowed hot enough to warm the air around him. Administrator Quelix, a gray slug-like being with too many eyes, watched everything from behind a floating desk. Trade Baroness Lixa moved her tentacles in patterns that meant she was thinking about profit. Each of these beings had seen hundreds of new species arrive at the Empire over the years. They knew what to expect. The warlike species always came, with armies and threats. They would stomp into the chamber, roar about their strength, and demand respect. Sometimes they would even attack someone just to prove how dangerous they were. The peaceful species usually came with gifts and long speeches about friendship. They would bow and scrape, offer tributes, and promise to cause no trouble. The smart species came with technology or information. They would demonstrate some amazing invention or share knowledge about distant stars. But the humans just walked in and stopped in front of the High Chancellor. Lee Tae-ho looked up at the crystal giant. The top of his head barely reached the Chancellor's chest. But he did not seem worried or impressed. He just waited. The silence stretched out. War Prince Zixanthor's scales grew brighter. Administrator Quelix's eyes blinked in confusion. Trade Baroness Lixa's tentacles moved faster. Finally, High Chancellor Vexthal spoke. His voice filled the chamber like rolling thunder. I am High Chancellor Vexthal of the Vorthan Supremacy, Speaker for the Galactic Empire. You stand before the representatives of 1,000 worlds and 10,000 species. State your names, state your purpose, state what power you bring to our attention. Lee Tae-ho nodded once as if the Chancellor had just introduced himself at a dinner party. I'm Lee Tae-ho, Ambassador for Earth and the human colonies. This is Dr. Park So-young, our science representative, and Captain Kim Woo-bin, our military representative. He paused and looked around the room calmly. We're here to join the Empire if you'll have us. We brought our papers, and we're ready to do whatever you need us to do to become members. That was it. No grand speech, no threats, no gifts, no demonstrations. War Prince Zixanthor leaned forward. His voice was like a volcano about to erupt. That's all? You come before the might of the Empire with briefcases and politeness? Dr. Park So-young smiled at him. We also brought some interesting data about crop rotation if you're interested. And Captain Kim has some nice pictures of our home system. Captain Kim nodded. Pretty sunsets on Mars these days. The alien representatives looked at each other. This was not going according to any script they knew. Administrator Quellick slithered forward on his belly, his many eyes focused on the humans one by one. Do you not understand what you face? The Empire spans half the galaxy. We command the loyalty of species that could destroy your entire world without thinking about it. And you want to join? That sounds right, Lee Tae-ho said. We figured it was better to be part of something good than to sit out in space by ourselves. Plus, Dr. Park really wants to study your agricultural methods. She's very interested in how you grow food on crystal worlds. Dr. Park nodded eagerly. The mineral absorption rates must be fascinating. High Chancellor Vexthal's crystal body shifted through different colors, blue to green to purple. In Vorthon culture, this meant deep confusion. You show no fear, he said slowly. Should we? Captain Kim asked. You seem like reasonable people. We're reasonable people. Seemed like it might work out. You make no demands. Don't really have any, Lee Tae-ho replied. We'd like to trade with folks, maybe learn some new things, share some of our own knowledge, nothing too complicated. You offer no displays of strength. We're not really the showing-off type, Dr. Park said apologetically. Trade Baroness Lixa's tentacles had stopped moving entirely. In her species, this was a sign of deep shock. But how do we know what you're capable of? How do we judge your worth to the Empire? Lee Tae-ho opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We put together a report. It has information about our technology, our population, our resources, our military capabilities, our cultural practices, and our economic systems. It's all there if you want to look it over. He held out the folder. We also included some references from the Centauri Trade Guild and the Proxima Research Station. We've worked with them before. High Chancellor Vexthul stared down at the small human holding up a manila folder. In 1,000 years of leading the Empire, he had never seen anything like this. Species that came in peace usually came in fear. Species that came in strength usually came in anger. Species that came in wisdom usually came with pride. But these humans just came. Like they were applying for a job or asking to join a club. We will consider your application, the Chancellor said finally. Great, Dr. Park said brightly. Should we wait somewhere or? There are guest quarters on Level 7, Administrator Quellick said weakly. Perfect, thank you so much. Lee Tae-ho bowed slightly to each of the representatives. We really appreciate your time. The three humans turned and walked out of the chamber as quietly as they had entered. Behind them, the most powerful beings in the known galaxy stood in silence, trying to figure out what had just happened. War Prince Zixanthor was the first to speak. Did they just apply to join the Empire like it was a neighborhood association? I believe they did, High Chancellor Vexthul said slowly. And they brought references? They brought references. Trade Baroness Lixa's tentacles began moving, again but slowly, uncertainly. I don't understand. Where's the angle? Where's the trick? What do they really want? Administrator Quellick's many eyes blinked in different patterns. I think they really just want to join. The silence returned, heavier this time. Outside in the corridor, Captain Kim looked at his companions. Think that went well? Hard to tell, Lee Tae-ho replied. But they didn't say no. Dr. Park was already looking at her tablet reading about fourth-hand crystal growth. I can't wait to see their agricultural labs. 6 months had passed since the humans arrived. 6 months of the strangest integration period anyone in the Empire could remember. Most new species went through predictable stages. First came the testing period, where established powers would challenge the newcomers to see what they were made of. Then came the adjustment period, where the new species would learn their place in the Empire's complex hierarchy. Finally came acceptance, after everyone understood where the new species fit. The humans had broken this pattern completely. War Prince Zixanthor discovered this first. The dragon people had a tradition. When new species joined the Empire, their strongest warrior would face the Dragon Prince in ritual combat. Not to the death, usually, but enough to show courage and establish respect. The War Prince had been looking forward to fighting a human. They looked so soft and weak. He expected a quick, entertaining match that would put them in their proper place. He found Captain Kim Woobin in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars through the massive windows. "Human," Zixanthor announced, his voice echoing, off the walls. "I challenge you to ritual combat. Face me with honor, or show yourself a coward before the Empire." Captain Kim turned around slowly. He looked at the 12-foot-tall dragon prince with his glowing scales and razor-sharp claws. Kim's expression didn't change at all. "Thanks, but I'm good," Kim said. Zixanthor blinked. His scales flared brighter. "You refuse my challenge?" "Yeah, we're not really the fighting type." Kim turned back to look at the stars. "Nice view out here, isn't it?" "You dare turn your back on me?" Zixanthor roared. Flames leaked from between his teeth. "I am a war prince of the draconic hegemony. I have conquered 17 worlds." "That's impressive," Kim said without turning around. "Must have been a lot of work." Zixanthor stared at the human's back. In his culture, this should have led to immediate violence. The human was showing the ultimate disrespect. But somehow Kim didn't seem disrespectful. He seemed bored. "Doctor." Park So-young walked into the observation deck carrying a tablet and a cup of coffee. "Oh, hello," she said cheerfully to Zixanthor. "You're the War Prince, right? I was hoping to meet you. I've been reading about Dragon World agriculture. Your volcanic soil must be incredible for growing heat-resistant crops." What?" Zixanthor's flames flickered with confusion. "Your agricultural reports from the Andromeda colonies. The crop yields are amazing. We've been trying to develop heat-resistant wheat on Mars, but we're having trouble with the protein structures. I don't suppose you'd be willing to share some technical data?" Zixanthor looked back and forth between Kim, who was still calmly watching the stars, and Dr. Park, who was looking at him like he was the most interesting person in the galaxy. "You want agricultural data?" he asked weakly. "If you don't mind. Oh, and if you have time, Captain Kim would probably love to hear about your space navigation techniques. He's always interested in how other species handle long-distance travel." Kim nodded without turning around. "The route mapping for 17 worlds must have been complex. Good logistics work." The War Prince's flames died down to almost nothing. He had come here to establish dominance through combat. Instead, he was being asked about farming and praised for his organizational skills. "I need to think about this," he said finally, and left. Meanwhile, in the Empire's administrative center, Lee Tae-ho was having his own strange encounters. Administrator. Quelix had been running the Department of Xenological Affairs for 200 years. He was an artist at bureaucracy. His department had perfected the art of making new species jump through impossible hoops just to see how they would react under pressure. The forms were deliberately confusing. The requirements contradicted each other. The deadlines were unreasonable. Most species would eventually lose their temper, which would give Quelix useful information about their character. But Lee Tae-ho just kept filling out forms. All of them. He sat in the waiting room every day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., working through stacks of paperwork with the same calm attention whether it was Form 1, Basic Species Information, or Form 73,847B, Request for Permission to Request Consideration for Preliminary Documentation Review. When forms contradicted each other, Lee would write polite notes asking for clarification. When deadlines were impossible, he would submit partial work with detailed explanations of what still needed to be completed and realistic timelines for finishing. After 3 weeks, Quelix couldn't stand it anymore. He slithered into the waiting room where Lee sat with his neat stacks of completed paperwork. "Don't you find this frustrating?" Quelix demanded, his many eyes blinking rapidly. Lee looked up from Form 92,156C. "What do you mean?" "The bureaucracy, the endless forms, the pointless requirements." "Oh." Lee considered this. Well, it's definitely a lot of paperwork, but I figure you probably have good reasons for needing all this information. Running an empire must be incredibly complicated. Quelix stared at him. You're not angry? Why? Would I be angry? You're just doing your job. Lee held up the form he'd been working on. This one's actually pretty interesting. I never thought about how complex it must be to track resource flows across different star systems. But this is all designed to be annoying, to test your limits. Lee blinked. Oh, well, I guess I don't really have limits for paperwork. Back on Earth, I once spent 2 years getting permits to build a library in my hometown. This is actually much more organized. That afternoon, Quelix called an emergency meeting with his staff. The human has been here 3 weeks, he told them. He's completed 94% of his integration paperwork. No one has ever completed more than 30% without having a breakdown. His assistant, a young Vorthon named Kexnil, raised a crystalline hand. Maybe we should just approve his application. We can't. He hasn't been properly tested. He hasn't shown us his breaking point. Sir, another assistant said quietly, I don't think he has a breaking point. At least not one we can reach with paperwork. Quelix spent that night staring at his computer screen, looking at Lee's file. The human had answered every question honestly, provided every document requested, and even submitted additional materials he thought might be helpful. It was the most complete application file in the history of the department. Across the station, Trade Baroness Lixa was having her own problems with the humans. She had approached them with a standard trade negotiation. A complex contract designed to give her maximum profit, while trapping the humans in unfavorable terms. It was the kind of deal she used to test new species' business sense. Economic attaché Cho Min-ho had read through all 847 pages of the contract in 2 days. Then he'd sent back a counter-proposal. Lixa stared at the documents Cho had returned. He had not only avoided every trap in her original contract, but had somehow turned the entire agreement around. If she signed this, she would end up paying the humans a premium for the right to trade with them. How did you find all the loopholes? She asked when they met to discuss terms. Cho looked confused. Loopholes? Oh, you mean the inconsistencies in sections 34A through 67J? We just fixed those. The original contract would have been impossible to fulfill as written. Those weren't inconsistencies, those were... Never mind, how did you prepare such a detailed counter-proposal so quickly? We had our legal team review it. How big is your legal team? All of them. All of... What? All humans. Every adult. Human is required to understand basic contract law, negotiation principles, and economic theory. We learned that was important. Cho pulled out a tablet. We also ran the contract past our agricultural specialists, our engineers, and our philosophers just to be safe. Your philosophers? They're very good at finding logical problems. Dr. Park suggested we ask them to look at it. Lixa's tentacles went completely still. You have an entire species of lawyers? Oh no, we're not all lawyers. We just all know enough law to avoid getting cheated. Cho smiled pleasantly. Is there anything in our counter-proposal you'd like to discuss? That evening, War Prince Zixanthor, Administrator Quelix, and Trade Baroness Lixa met in a private chamber. They refused to fight, Zixanthor reported. They won't break under bureaucratic pressure, Quelix added. And they're better at contracts than I am. Lixa finished miserably. The 3 powerful beings sat in silence. What kind of species are they? Zixanthor asked finally. I don't know, Quelix replied, but I'm starting to think we should approve their membership application. Why? Quelix's many eyes blinked slowly. Because I'm afraid of what might happen if we don't. Outside, Lee Taeho was finishing up Form 103-9982Q, Final Review Documentation Supplementary Materials Request, when he got a message on his tablet. Huh, he said to Kim and Dr. Park, who were sitting nearby. They want to schedule our final integration interview. Think we passed? Dr. Park asked. Hard to tell, Kim replied. But nobody's shot at us yet, so that's probably good. Lee nodded and went back to his paperwork. He only had 47 more forms to go. The word spread through the empire like ripples in still water. They don't get angry. It started in the outer rim stations where traders and diplomats gathered to share news and gossip. Someone would mention the new species, the humans, and how strange they were. I tried to insult their mother worlds, a Krathan merchant reported over drinks. Called their planets worthless rocks. The human just asked if I'd been there myself, and when I said no, he offered to show me pictures, said they had some beautiful landscapes I might enjoy. They don't panic either, added a Nexari diplomat. During the solar flare last month when all the station's shields failed, everyone was running and screaming. The humans just started helping with evacuations, calm as morning mist. They just adapt, whispered a Zephyrian engineer. Whatever. You throw at them, they find a way to make it work. The stories multiplied and spread inward toward the Empire's core worlds. Each tale seemed impossible, but there were too many witnesses, too many independent reports. Trade Baroness Lixa learned just how true these stories were when she decided to test the human colony on Kepler 7. The humans had established a small settlement on the planet's southern continent. It was a modest operation, a few thousand people growing crops and mining rare metals, perfect targets for her standard colonist exploitation contract. Lixa had used this contract hundreds of times. It was a masterpiece of legal manipulation, designed to trap naive colonial governments in impossible obligations. The colonists would sign eagerly, desperate for trade relationships, only to discover later that they had essentially signed away their rights to their own planet. She arrived at Kepler 7 with confidence and a briefcase full of legal documents. Economic. Attaché Cho Minho met her at the colony's small administrative building. It was a simple structure made of local stone, with Earth-style gardens around it. Everything about it looked peaceful and ordinary. Baroness Lixa, Cho said warmly, bowing slightly. Welcome to New Seoul. We're honored by your visit. They sat in a conference room that looked like it could have been in any office building on Earth. Cho poured tea, actual Earth tea, and offered small cakes. I've brought a trade proposal, Lixa announced, sliding the contract across the table. Standard terms for colonial resource extraction. I think you'll find it quite generous. Cho accepted the documents with a smile. Thank you so much. We'll review this carefully and get back to you. There's no need for lengthy review, Lixa said smoothly. The terms are straightforward. Sign now and we can begin operations immediately. Oh, we always review contracts thoroughly, Cho replied pleasantly. It's just our way. Would you like to see our colony while you're here? We've had some success with our agricultural programs. Lixa agreed, expecting to see struggling farmers and basic facilities that would emphasize how much the colonists needed. Her deal. Instead, she saw thriving farms with crops she didn't recognize, efficient mining operations using innovative techniques, and happy people who seemed genuinely glad to meet her. Children ran up to show her drawings they'd made of her tentacles. Engineers eagerly explained their new water purification systems. How long did it take you to establish all this? She asked, confused. About 18 months, Cho replied. We had some challenges at first. The soil chemistry was tricky and we had to figure out how to work with the local weather patterns. But we got it sorted out. Lixa had seen colonies that took decades to reach this level of development. 2 days. Later, Cho returned her contract with a counterproposal. Lixa stared at the documents in her hotel room. She read them 3 times, ran them through her computer's legal analysis software, and even called her personal attorney back on her home world. Somehow, Cho had not only avoided every trap in her original contract, but had completely reversed the entire agreement. If she signed this, she would end up paying the humans a premium for the privilege of buying their resources. Worse, the contract included clauses that would require her to follow fair labor practices, environmental protection, standards, and customer satisfaction guarantees. This is impossible, she muttered to herself. No one catches every clause, no one thinks of every angle. She called Cho the next morning. I need to understand something. How did you analyze my contract so quickly? Oh, we had our legal team. Look at it, Cho replied cheerfully. How large is your legal team? Well, there are about 3,000 adults in the colony, so 3,000? 3,000 lawyers? Oh no, we're not lawyers. But everyone learns basic contract law before we leave Earth. Also economics, negotiation theory, resource management, and conflict resolution. We found out those skills are useful when you're starting colonies. Lixa felt dizzy. Everyone? Your farmers know contract law? Sure. Also engineering, biology, chemistry, and usually at least 2 other specialties. You never know what you'll need on a new world. What about your children? What do they learn? Same things, plus whatever they're interested in. The kids who showed you their drawings yesterday? They're also studying stellar navigation and atmospheric chemistry. One of them is already working on improvements to our mining equipment. That evening, Lixa sent an encrypted message to her business partner on the core world of Zentaria. Cancel all plans for exploiting human colonies, she wrote. These people are not marks. They might be the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Her partner replied within hours. Dangerous how? Military threat? No, Lixa typed back. They're competent, all of them, individually and collectively. We can't cheat them, we can't intimidate them, and we can't trick them. They'll just outthink us, outwork us, and probably thank us for the learning experience. Meanwhile, other species were making similar discoveries. General Krextar of the Militaristic Union had sent scouts to observe human military exercises. His spies returned with reports that made no sense. They don't train for conquest, reported Commander Vexdahl. Their entire military doctrine is based on defense, disaster relief, and peacekeeping. Peacekeeping? Krextar's mechanical augmentations whirred as he leaned forward. What kind of military trains for peacekeeping? According to their public records, they spent most of their species' history fighting each other. They got very good at war. Then they decided they didn't want to do it anymore. Species don't just stop being warlike. Humans did. They still maintain their military capabilities, but they use them for rescue operations, disaster response, and preventing conflicts instead of starting them. Krextar studied the reports. Human military technology was impressive but not revolutionary. Their tactics were solid but not groundbreaking. What disturbed him was their approach. They train their soldiers to de-escalate situations? Yes, sir. Every human soldier learns negotiation, cultural sensitivity, emergency medicine, engineering, and basic diplomacy. They're taught that the best victory is the one where nobody has to fight. And their weapons? Designed to disable, not destroy. They seem to prefer capturing enemies alive and then helping them. Rehabilitation programs job, training, psychological counseling. They try to figure out why people become enemies and then fix the underlying problems. Krextar was quiet for a long time. These humans defeated their own warlike nature? It appears so, sir, and now they want to share that knowledge with the rest of the galaxy. That seems to be their intention, yes. That night, Krextar sat in his command center, surrounded by displays showing the military might of the Union. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, millions of soldiers ready to fight and die for the Empire. For the first time in his career, he wondered if there might be a better way. Back on Kepler 7 station, High Chancellor Vex Thule was receiving similar reports from across the Empire. Each species that had tried to test, challenge, or exploit the humans had discovered the same thing. Humans were reasonable. It sounded simple, but the implications were staggering. In a galaxy where most conflicts arose from misunderstandings, resource competition, and cultural clashes, a species that consistently responded with calm reason and genuine problem-solving was like finding a cure for war itself. Sir, his aide Kex Neal reported, we've received formal requests from 17 different species asking for human mediators to help with their territorial disputes. 17? Yes, sir. Apparently the humans have a reputation for finding solutions that work for everyone. Vexathule's crystalline form shifted through thoughtful colors. Have they succeeded? Every time, sir. They're currently mediating the Draconic Nexari border dispute, the Krathan succession crisis, and the Zephyrian trade war. All three conflicts are moving toward peaceful resolution. How? According to the reports, they just listen to everyone, ask questions, and then suggest solutions that address the real problems instead of just the symptoms. Vexthul stood silently for several minutes. Outside his office windows, he could see ships from dozens of species docked at the station. For centuries, managing all these different cultures had required a careful balance of force, diplomacy, and strategic manipulation. Kexnil, he said finally, I want you to prepare a full report on human integration for the Imperial Council. Yes, sir. What recommendation should I include? Vexthul's colors shifted again, settling into a pattern that meant deep thoughtfulness mixed with something that might have been hope. The crisis began on a Tuesday. 17 colony worlds in the Outer Rings declared independence from the Galactic Empire at exactly the same moment. Their coordinated announcement sent shockwaves through every government office, military base, and trading post in civilized space. The rebellion had been planned perfectly. The colonies had stockpiled weapons, formed military alliances, and chosen leaders who promised to fight to the death, rather than submit to imperial rule. They controlled key shipping routes, and had enough combined military power to make any reconquest attempt extremely costly. General Krextar stood before the holographic display in the Imperial War Room, studying the tactical situation. Red markers showed rebel positions, blue showed Imperial forces. The math was simple and ugly. Minimum casualty estimates? He asked his staff. 2 million dead, reported his tactical officer. That's if everything goes perfectly for us. Realistically, 5 to 7 million. Maybe more if they've hidden weapons we don't know about. High Chancellor Vexthul's crystal form resonated with deep, troubled tones. Around the war room, representatives from the Empire's major species stood in grim silence. This was the kind of crisis that had destroyed previous galactic governments. Standard protocol calls for immediate military response, announced War Prince Zixanthor. His scales glowed with suppressed anger. Overwhelming force to crush the rebellion quickly before it spreads. Agreed, rumbled General Krextar. Every day we wait, more systems might join them. The economic disruption alone could destabilize half the Empire, added Trade Baroness Lixa, her tentacles moving in agitated patterns. Administrator Quellix's many eyes blinked rapidly as he calculated logistics. We'll need to mobilize the 3rd and 5th fleets plus support elements from... Let us talk to them. The quiet voice cut through the planning like a knife through thunder. Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Li Teho, who had been sitting silently in the corner taking notes. I beg your pardon? High Chancellor Vexthul asked. Li stood up, still holding his notepad. Let us talk to them. Before the shooting starts. War Prince Zixanthor's scales flared bright red. Talk? They have committed treason against the Empire itself. They mock our authority and threaten our unity. Have they? Dr. Park So-Young asked mildly. She had been sitting next to Li reading something on her tablet. Or are they just frustrated? They declared independence. General Krextar's mechanical voice rose several octaves. They seized Imperial facilities. They're forming military alliances against us. Right, Li nodded. But why? The room went silent. It was such a simple question that nobody had thought to ask it. Because they're traitors. Zixanthor growled. Because they want power, Quellix added. Because they see an opportunity for profit, Lixa concluded. Captain Kim Wubin spoke for the first time since the crisis began. Did anyone ask them, or... Silence. I mean, Kim continued in his calm, patient way. Did anyone actually ask the colonies why they want independence? What their specific problems are? What they need that they're not getting? High Chancellor Vexthul's colors shifted through the spectrum. You're suggesting negotiation? We're suggesting conversation, Dr. Park said. Find out what's really going on. Maybe there's a solution that doesn't involve anyone dying. Impossible, Sixanthor roared. You cannot negotiate with rebellion. It shows weakness. Does it? Lee asked. Or does it show confidence? If the Empire is as strong and fair as we believe it is, what do we have to fear from conversation? General Krextar's augmentations whirred as he processed this. You think you can convince 17 worlds to give up their independence movement? Maybe, Lee replied. Or maybe we'll learn something that helps us find a better solution. Worth trying before we start killing people, don't you think? The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Every argument against negotiation was raised. Precedent, authority, the risk of appearing weak, the chance that other systems might rebel if these colonies weren't punished. But in the end, curiosity won. The Empire's leaders had seen what humans could accomplish with patience and rational thinking. They were willing to let them try. Lee Tae-ho, Dr. Park So-young, and diplomat Han Soo-jin departed for the Outer Rings the next day. They traveled in a small civilian transport with no military escort, no weapons, and no demands. They simply asked for permission to visit and talk. The rebel leaders agreed to meet, probably because they were curious about what the Empire would say. The first colony was New Horizon, a mining world that produced rare metals essential for starship construction. The colonists had been mining for 15 years under imperial contracts that gave them barely enough profit to survive. Colony Administrator Bang Joo-ho met them at the small spaceport. He was clearly nervous, surrounded by armed guards who looked ready for trouble. We're not here to threaten anyone, Lee said immediately. We just want to understand what's happening. What's happening is that we're free, Bang replied stiffly. For the first time since we started this colony, we're free. Free from what? Dr. Park asked gently. Bang stared at her. You don't know? We know the official reports, Han Soo-jin said. But we'd like to hear your side. For the next 4 hours, Bang and the colony leaders explained their situation. The imperial mining contracts locked them into selling their resources at fixed prices that hadn't been adjusted for inflation in a decade. Environmental regulations were enforced so strictly that they couldn't expand their operations, but social services were so limited that they couldn't provide proper health care or education for their children. We're not anti-empire, Bang said finally. But we can't survive under the current system. Our children are leaving because there's no future here. In 10 years, this colony will be dead. Dr. Park took notes while Lee and Han asked questions. Not accusatory questions, not leading questions, just simple requests for information. What would it take to make this work? Lee asked. Work how? Work for everyone. The colony, the empire, the people who depend on your mining output. Bang looked confused. You want to help us solve the problem? Why wouldn't we? The same scene played out on 16 other worlds. Each colony had different specific problems, but the underlying issues were remarkably similar. Economic policies that had made sense 50 years ago but no longer reflected reality. Environmental rules that protected planets but ignored human needs. Social programs that worked fine for established core worlds but failed in frontier conditions. None of the colonists were anti-empire. They were just trying to survive systems that no longer worked for them. It's not malice, Han Soo-jin reported to Lee during their trip between worlds. It's just bureaucratic inertia. Nobody updated these policies as conditions changed. Classic institutional failure, Dr. Park agreed. The kind of thing that happens in any large organization. So what do we do? Lee asked. Fix it, Dr. Park said simply. The solution they developed wasn't dramatic or revolutionary. It was a comprehensive restructuring of colonial governance that addressed every legitimate grievance while maintaining imperial unity. Mining contracts were adjusted to reflect current market conditions. Environmental regulations were revised to balance protection with development. Social services were restructured to work in frontier conditions. Local governments were given more autonomy to handle day-to-day decisions while remaining part of the imperial framework. Most importantly, they established regular review processes to prevent the same problems from developing in the future. This is everything we wanted, Bang Juho said when he read the proposed changes. But why would the Empire agree to this? Because it's the right thing to do, Lee replied. And because the Empire is stronger when its people are happy. 3 months after the rebellion began, 17 worlds quietly resumed their imperial membership. No battles were fought, no examples were made, no one was punished. Instead, the changes developed for the Outer Rings colonies were implemented across the Empire, improving conditions for millions of people on hundreds of worlds. General Krextar studied the final reports in his office, surrounded by tactical displays that had never been used. His staff had prepared for the largest military operation in decades. Instead, they had spent 3 months coordinating humanitarian aid shipments. "Sir," his aide reported, "casualty figures from the Outer Rings crisis." "How many?" Krextar asked. Quietly, "0, sir. No combat casualties, no civilian casualties. Actually, their health statistics improved during the negotiation period because of the medical supplies we sent." General Krextar sat back in his chair. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen a rebellion end without bloodshed. "Sir?" his aide asked. "What are your orders for the 3rd and 5th fleets?" Krextar looked at the tactical displays, then at the reports from the Outer Rings. "Stand down. All units return to normal patrol status." "Yes, sir. And the humans responsible for the negotiation?" "Send them my personal thanks," Krextar said, "and ask if they'd be willing to teach our diplomatic corps some of their techniques." Back on Kepler-7 station, High Chancellor Vextel stood in his office looking out at the stars. The crisis that could have torn apart the Empire had been resolved by 3 humans with briefcases and an unlimited supply of patience. "Kexnil," he called to his aide. "Yes, sir?" 5 years had passed since humanity's quiet arrival at Kepler-7. The Galactic Empire still looked the same from the outside. Same territories, same species, same basic structure. But everything had changed. The change started with a simple, building on the Empire's capital world of Zentaria. It was nothing special to look at. Gray stone, practical design, with a modest sign that read, Department of Human Resources. Most beings walking past would assume it handled paperwork for government employees. They would be wrong. Director Yoon Jae-hyuk sat in his office on the building's top floor, reviewing the day's crisis reports. 3 economic collapses, 2 territorial disputes, 1 religious conflict, 4 trade wars, and a famine on the Outer Rim. It was actually a quiet day. His assistant, Jung Min-ji, brought him coffee and the latest staffing reports. "We've got 43,000 humans deployed across the Empire now," she said. "Response times are down to 18 hours for major crises, 6 hours for emergencies." "Any problems?" Cultural mediator Sao Jun-ho is requesting backup on Proxima. 7. The Krathen and Nexari are arguing about fishing rights again, but this time they've brought in religious elements. Send Lee Hee-jin to assist. She's good with theological disputes. Yoon made a note on his tablet. "What about the famine situation?" Agricultural specialist Nam Da-yoon is already on site with a full team. They've identified the problem. Soil bacteria that Earth crops aren't adapted to. She's working with local farmers to develop resistant strains. Yoon nodded. 3 years ago, a famine like this would have meant months of suffering while the imperial bureaucracy slowly organized relief efforts. Now human specialists arrived within hours of any crisis report, armed with practical solutions and unlimited patience. The secret wasn't superior technology or mysterious powers. It was something much simpler and more terrifying to the Empire's traditional power structures. Humans didn't panic. When financial analyst Kim Bo-ra received a report that the Draconic Trade Consortium was about to collapse, threatening the economy. Of 47 worlds, she didn't call emergency meetings or demand immediate action. She made a cup of tea, sat down with the financial records, and spent 3 days figuring out exactly what had gone wrong and how to fix it. Her solution was elegant and comprehensive, a debt restructuring plan that saved the consortium while protecting the workers and investors who depended on it. The plan took 6 months to implement, but every step was carefully explained to all parties involved. When Boundary Commissioner Lee Hai-jin arrived at the contested border between the Zephyrian hives and the Vorthan crystal territories, she didn't try to impose imperial law or threaten military action. She spent 2 weeks living with each group, learning their customs, understanding their needs, and mapping every disputed meter of territory. Her final border agreement was 97 pages long and addressed everything from mineral rights to religious site access to seasonal migration patterns. Both sides signed it eagerly because both sides had helped create it. When cultural mediator Seo Jun-ho faced the religious conflict on Proxima 7, where the Krathan's warrior honor faith was clashing with the Nexari's pacifist meditation beliefs, he didn't try to convert anyone or suppress anything. He organized a series of discussions where members of both faiths could explain their beliefs to each other. After 3 months of patient conversation, the two groups discovered they had more in common than they'd thought. They still practiced different religions, but they stopped trying to prevent each other from doing so. The pattern was always the same. Where other species saw problems, humans saw puzzles. Where others saw enemies, humans saw people with needs that weren't being met. Where others saw permanent conflicts, humans saw systems that needed adjustment. Most importantly, humans had time. The thing about humans, High Chancellor Vexthol explained to a gathering of imperial governors, is that they think in longer time scales than the rest of us. What do you mean? Asked Governor Threxval of the Outer Colonies. When we see a crisis, we want it solved immediately. When humans see a crisis, they want it solved permanently. They're willing to spend years on a problem if it means the problem never comes back. That's actually terrifying, Governor Threxval admitted. Why? Because it means they're always thinking about the future, not just next year or next decade, but next century, next millennium. Vexthol's crystalline form shifted through thoughtful colors. The governor was right. Humans didn't just solve problems. They prevented future problems that nobody else had even thought of yet. The Empire's traditional approach to governance had been reactive. Crisis would emerge, force would be applied, temporary stability would be restored, and everyone would wait for the next crisis. Humans were proactive. They looked for potential problems before they became crises, addressed root causes instead of symptoms, and built systems designed to improve over time, rather than just maintain the status quo. The results spoke for themselves. Military conflicts in the Empire had dropped by 73% in 5 years. Most territorial disputes now went to human mediators instead of battlefields. Economic disruptions were caught and corrected before they could spread. Famine relief had become so efficient that some worlds actually improved their food security during crisis periods. But the real change was deeper than statistics could measure. Admiral Vextar of the Imperial Fleet stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at a sector of space that had been a constant war zone for decades. The Krathan and Draconic forces were still there, but they weren't fighting. Instead, their ships were working together on a joint engineering project, building a new trade station that would serve both species. Status report, she ordered. All, quiet Admiral, her tactical officer reported. The construction crews are ahead of schedule. Both fleets are maintaining perfect cooperation. Any requests for military intervention? None in the past 6 months, Admiral. Admiral Vextar had commanded warships for 30 years. She had never seen such sustained peace in this sector. Sir, her communications officer called. We're receiving a message from the human coordinator on the construction project. Engineer, Park Jin-soo wants to know if we'd be willing to provide security for a cultural exchange program between the Krathan and Draconic colonies. Cultural exchange? Yes, sir. Apparently, the children from both species are curious about each other's customs. The adults want to arrange visits, but they're requesting military escort to ensure everyone feels safe. Admiral Vextar considered this. Military escorts for cultural exchange programs. It was possibly the strangest use of warships in Imperial history. It was also exactly the kind of thing humans would suggest. Tell Engineer Park we'll be happy to provide security, she said, and ask him if he needs help with anything else. Back on Zentaria, Director Yoon Jae-hyuk finished reviewing the daily reports and leaned back in his chair. Through his office window, he could see the Imperial capital spreading out beneath him. Beings from hundreds of species moved through, the streets going about their daily lives in peace. His tablet chimed with a new message. Crisis report from the Andromeda sector. A trade dispute between the Nixari Collective and the Zephyrian hives that was threatening to disrupt shipping. Roots. Yoon smiled and forwarded the report to economic specialist Cho Min-ho, who was currently between assignments. Cho would probably have the situation analyzed within 6 hours and a proposed solution ready within a day. 3 years ago, this kind of trade dispute would have led to months of economic warfare. Now it would likely be resolved by the end of the week, with both sides ending up more prosperous than before. His assistant Young Min-ji knocked on his door. "Sir, we've received a request from the Imperial Council. They want to know if we can help with the integration of the new species that just made contact, the Ethereal Collective from the Magellanic Clouds." "Of course," Yoon replied. "Send Ambassador Lee Taiho and his team. They're excellent with first contact situations." "Already done, sir. They left this morning." Yoon nodded approvingly. The Department of Human Resources now ran so smoothly that many problems were solved before he even heard about them. "Anything else?" "The Imperial Council also wanted me to ask you something personal, sir." "What's that?" Young Min-ji looked slightly embarrassed. "They want to know if humanity is planning to take over the Empire." Yoon laughed, a sound that would have been incomprehensible to most species 5 years ago, but which had become familiar throughout the galaxy. "Tell them we already have," he said. "We just did it by making everything work better instead of breaking things that worked badly." That evening, as the capital world's 3 suns set behind the crystal spires of the government district, beings across the Empire went about their lives with a sense of security and stability that their ancestors had never known. Trade flowed freely along routes that had once been battlegrounds. Colonies that had teetered on the edge of survival now prospered. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The Galactic Empire had finally learned the secret that humanity had discovered during its own chaotic history: that the most revolutionary thing you could do was refuse to accept that problems couldn't be solved. In classrooms across 1,000 worlds, young beings of every species,